I'm Mr. Boy. I'm going to teach you about the lymphatic system today. Here's a closer look. The sole purpose of the lymphatic system is to house the immune system. There are 5 parts of the lymphatic system: the lymph, the lymphocytes, the lymphatic vessels, lymphatic tissue, and lastly, lymphatic organs. Lymph is the fluid leaked out of the capillaries. Lymphocytes include T helper and T suppressor cells, cytotoxic cells, B cells, and NK cells. Lymphatic vessels are used as the collection system to return lymph to the bloodstream. Lymphatic tissue includes lymphatic nodules, Peyer's patches, tonsils, and gut-associated lymphatic tissue. Lymphatic organs include lymph nodes, thymus, and spleen. Lymph capillaries, also known as terminal lymphatics, are made up of 2 key components: minivalves and lacteals. Minivalves let lymph into the lymph capillaries. Lacteals are lymph capillaries in the villi of the large intestines. They help absorb dietary fats, called chyle. Lymphatic collecting vessels pick lymph up from the capillaries and bring them to the lymph trunks. The lymph trunks go into ducts. There are 2 different kinds of ducts: the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. The right lymphatic duct drains the upper right side of the body and empties between the right subclavian and the right jugular. The thoracic duct is the bigger of the 2 ducts. The thoracic duct drains below the diaphragm on the left side. The cisterna chyli drains lymph from the digestive system. The thoracic duct empties into the left jugular or left subclavian. Lymph is transported to the heart by 2 different mechanisms. One is the muscular pump, in which a contraction increases the lymph towards the heart. The second is the respiratory pump, in which the increased pressure moves the lymph towards the heart. Lymphedema is the swelling caused by a blockage or a removal of blood vessels. There are 3 different types of lymphoid cells. The first is lymphocytes. They are produced in the red bone marrow. Regulatory T cells control the immune system responses. Helper T cells help the immune system. Suppressor T cells slow down or stop immune response. Cytotoxic T cells kill. B cells produce antibodies, while NK cells act as the immune surveillance. Macrophages eat other cells. Dendritic cells are a type of macrophage found in the lymphoid tissue. Reticular cells form a network that makes up the structure of a lymphoid tissue. Cellular immunity is immunity caused by direct contact with some type of T cell. Humoral immunity is immunity caused by production of antibodies by B cells. Bacterium is phagocytized by a macrophage, which presents antigens to activate cytotoxic T cells and helper T cells, which leads to cytotoxic T directly destroying bacterium and helper T activating B cells. This leads to the formation of plasma cells, antibodies versus antigens. Viruses infect tissue cells and cause antigens to appear on cell surfaces. This leads to infected macrophages. Antigen presentation can lead to 2 things: activation of helper T cells or stimulation of NK cells. Through activation of helper T cells, the B cells are stimulated. Then antibody cytotoxic T cells are stimulated. Then the infected cells are destroyed. When NK cells are stimulated, the infected cells are destroyed. Lymphopoiesis is the formation of lymphocytes. Bone marrow, thymus, and peripheral lymphatic tissues are involved. Hemocytoblast in bone marrow targets the thymus. Thymosin is produced. This causes T cell differentiation, which spreads to the spleen, bone marrow, and peripheral tissue. Hemocytoblasts can also take place within the bone marrow. B cells move to the lymph nodes, spleen, and other tissues, while NK cells move to peripheral tissues. Lymphoid tissues have two functions. One is to house lymphocytes. The second is to provide a place for immune surveillance. The structure of a lymphoid tissue includes connective tissue, which provides places for white blood cells to sit. There are 4 different types of lymphoid tissue. The first is diffuse lymphatic tissue, which is patches of lymphoid tissue scattered all over the body. The second is lymphatic follicles, which are nodules of lymphoid tissue and contain germinal centers. This forms a part of lymph nodes, the appendix, and Peyer's patches. The third type of lymphoid tissue is the tonsil, which forms a ring of lymphoid tissue around the small intestines and the throat. Locations include the palatine, which is the flaps on the throat, the lingual, which is the base of the tongue, the pharyngeal, which is the back of the throat by uvula, and the tubular tonsils, which go around the Eustachian tubes. The last lymphoid tissues include mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, also known as MALT, and gut-associated lymphatic tissue, known as GALT. The location of these tissues include Peyer's patches of lymphatic tissue, the appendix of the large intestine, and the bronchi in the lungs. The function is to trap pathogens, and the structure includes no crypts. The 3 lymphoid organs include the lymph nodes, the thymus gland, and the spleen. The function of the lymph node is to filter lymph. Its structure includes a capsule, stroma, inner and outer cortexes, medulla, and lymph sinuses. The capsule within the lymph node contains trabeculae. The stroma is the framework of the lymph node. The outer cortex is where the B cells divide into plasma, or antibodies. The inner cortex works with T cells. Medulla is the middle part, or the sinuses, of the lymph node. The medullary cords are the dark area and contain the same contents as the cortex. Lymph sinuses, also known as lymph capillaries, are the open spots, or macrophages. Circulation within the lymph nodes begins in the lymphatic vessels. These vessels are afferent, which means that they move towards the node. This leads to the subcapsular sinus, then the smaller sinuses, then the hilus, and then the efferent, or away, lymphatic vessels. The location of lymph nodes includes a cluster along lymph vessels, such as inguinal, axillary, and cervical regions. The clinical aspects of lymph nodes include buboes, hey, that's me, which are the swollen infected lymph nodes, and the 2-degree sites of cancer from metastasis, which is the spreading of cancer due to breaking apart of tumors. The second lymphoid organ that we will be talking about is the thymus gland. It is located in the chest, under the sternum. Its structure includes lobes with capsules, stroma, and thymic lobules. The thymus is most active in children and degenerates as you get older. As for the structure, the capsule holds stroma of the epithelial cells, or the thymocytes. The thymic lobules include the cortex and the medulla. Within the medulla is Hasel's corpuscle. Then, the blood-thymus barrier is the ninja training school for T cells. Lastly, the function of the thymus gland is the site for T cell maturation. The third and final lymphoid organ is the spleen. It is also the largest of the three lymphoid organs. Its location is on the left side, under the diaphragm. The structure of the spleen includes a capsule, hilus, white pulp, and red pulp. The capsule contains trabeculae, which is in between the walls. Hilus, or hilum, is an indentation where blood vessels go into a solid organ. White pulp is where the white blood cells are. Red pulp contains many macrophages, which recycle the red blood cells. The red pulp includes the venous sinuses and the splenic cords. Circulation within the spleen goes from the splenic artery to the trabecular arteries, to the capillaries, then to the red pulp, then to the sinusoids, the small veins, the trabecular veins, and lastly, the splenic vein. Lastly, the clinical aspects of the spleen include a splenectomy, which is when there is no need for the spleen in the body. I hope that this video made learning about the lymphatic system easier and, especially, more fun. Until next time, I'm Mr. Boys. See you later, kids!